I mean, I would say that there's a slate of movies coming out, I think, this year that are like abject. They're absolutely propaganda pieces because it's an election year.
Well, yeah.
I mean, that's one of the reasons I don't really want to see Civil War because I'm like, I see what you're
Hey,
doing.
as
No.
long as Civil War has a co-ed shower scene, we're good. And welcome everyone to the spoiler room. It is look at that look. I love that look. It is the first day of the year, and what a way to kick off this year than with an episode of the spoiler room. So thank you for venturing down the stairs, pulling up a chair, and celebrating a happy new year with me and the crew as we kick off a new year. And yes, folks, we have a new year theme. It's called Rated PC for Pre-Code, and based off of those films, one each month, I base a theme. And yeah, we spun the dial last week, and they got Scarface, the original 1932, which we will talk about next week. But that sparked my brain, and it gave me Scarred Faces Month, which is what we're here about. And we're talking about films that have the word Scarface in them, which.
And you found all 5.
And I found all 5. I was worried because I looked at it going, well, maybe I need to take a week off because I can only find 4. And then I ran across the 5th one, which is the one we're talking about tonight.
Which is an alternate title.
Which is an alternate title.
The original title. So but it works.
It works. It was released in the States under this title, so it works. It works, mate. And yes, we are looking at 1976, Mr. Scarface, or as it was known across the seas as Rulers of the City. And tonight we have a wonderful crew with me to discuss this 1976 Jack Palance vehicle. He's back with us in the spoiler room once again from the last drive-in. It's none other than Mr. Joe Randazzo.
Hey, everyone.
I can say you're from the last drive-in.
I mean, I can now that technically I even put it on the thing here. Now that it's out there.
It's out there now.
They are paying me.
You are part of the staff, so therefore, but
I'm not going to go out and say I'm hosting it. But.
Well, no.
Yet?
I mean, yet. Joe, Bob, and Darcy, watch out.
There you go. I'll be your Darcy.
Well, you're already a Joe, so you're halfway there.
Yeah,
yes. I just need the Bob.
You need the Bob. That's right. And also with us, you heard his dulcet tones, the man who keeps coming back for more. He is here a lot, and he hasn't run streaming, and I appreciate it quite a bit. It's other than Mr. Ian Simmons. Hello, Ian.
Mark, how could I run away when we're kicking off 2024 with this movie? I was literally astounded. I wanted to text you at like 4:30 in the morning when I was watching this saying, my God, this movie is phenomenal.
It really is.
I don't know. This is one of those movies where I watch and I'm like, why is this not at the top or at least somewhere on the tippy tongues of people who discuss movies? Because this is how?
I've never seen this movie before either.
Never heard of it.
I watched it and I ran across it because of the title and watched it yesterday. I watched the one cut of it, which was the Rulers of the City cut. And then I watched this morning the Mr. Scarface cut. And it was still wonderful the second time around. Like, this movie is amazing. It's
a lot of fun.
But it's so much fun.
I went off my Raro video, Rulers of the City, because I've loved this movie for a couple years. And I was hoping, as soon as I saw you were doing this, I'm like, oh my God, I hope I have the night off, because sometimes I work on Mondays, sometimes I don't work on Mondays. So I was like, if I'm off, I'm doing this one, because nobody talks about this movie at all. And it really is a solid, fun crime movie.
And that's the thing. Like, I was trying to figure this out while I was watching it. Like, why don't they make movies like this anymore? I mean, forget about the fact that it's an Italian film. Like, you could remake this movie. People talk about remakes and how they're done to death. I always figure, I think we've talked about this, remake bad movies and make them good, or dig up an obscure film that maybe not a lot of people know about and kind of Tarantino it, bring it to the masses in some form or another, either by a remake or an homage. This movie is brilliant. And even though, like, at the end, you realize, oh, it's kind of a lighthearted gangster film.
It becomes that, at least.
It's the biggest contradiction, but the whole time I'm sitting there waiting for this to get, like, really dark and fucked up, and it does go those places, but it ends with three best friends driving off in a sunset in the coolest motherfucking car I've ever seen in a movie. Puma GT. What is this car?
I loved it. I watched it and I was just smiling. I'm like, oh my God, this movie's amazing. When you get okay, before we get into it, we should tell folks a little bit about what this movie's about. Joe, since you got the box or whatnot, I don't know.
Yeah,
how
you want to do that? Want me to read off the
description is.
box?
Yeah, read off the
All right, hang on.
box if you can.
Wait, I
All
gotta
right.
ask though, is that a Blu-ray or is that a DVD or what?
I thought
where
I
can
had the
get
Blu-ray.
this?
Apparently, I bought the Fernando de Leo box set on the Volume 2. I bought on Blu-ray. Volume 1 apparently I bought on DVD, and I just never replaced it. Oh well, it still looks amazing. The paradox of rulers of the city, or Mr. Scarface, as we're going to refer to it tonight, is that the rulers are small-time crooks and suburban gangsters who barely manage to make ends meet. But that's what makes the film so real and accurate, and perhaps why Quentin Tarantino calls the rulers of the city the pivotal force behind his decision to be a filmmaker. So there you go. Tarantino does love this movie.
Go.
In the film, Tony is a mob loan collector who's unsatisfied with his position in life and constantly dreams of living it rich in Brazil with his brother, cousin, according to the dialogue.
Yeah.
To make some quick cash, Tony joins forces of organized crime, making his way up the ladder. Together with Napoli, another mob enforcer, Tony hatches a plan to con mob boss Manzari, a.k.a. Mr. Scarface, Jack Palance, out of a fortune, but Manzari isn't about to let that happen.
Wow, they don't even bring up the other subplot in here that opens this film for crying out.
Maybe that's a little too spoilery.
Well,
but
this is the spoiler
you kind of
report,
know
so
when you see it happen, and then you see the kids going through. You see,
Yeah.
it cuts them being part of the lifestyle. You know that in the end, it's going to be revealed that it's one of the, it's the father of one of the kids that Jack Palance killed. But yeah, that's Al Cleaver from Lucio Fulci's Zombie and a whole bunch of great movies. So yeah, this has a kind of a fun pedigree cast. I don't know how they lured Jack Palance into this because they clearly didn't have a lot of money. Whatever money they had, they spent on Palance. But yeah, it's just a fun pulpy crime thriller with some great stunts. Like they got actual I was watching on the DVD. I was watching the extras. There's a 15-minute documentary from Nocturno Cinema on it. And they're talking about how they hired actual Italian motocross champions to come in and do those scenes at the slaughterhouse. So I was like, it shows, man. They put some effort into these things. It's why I love these 70s Italian crime movies. They're all a lot of fun. Varying in quality, but they always have excellent stunt work, just creative kills. And they always have one big American actor, one big American star in the lead. It'll be Jack Palance or Van Heflin or whoever they could dig up that I've seen in the past. I'd seen I don't remember if I read this in one of the Italian horror books I have, or if I've seen it in interviews, where they would be like, we want to make a movie. Let's lure Richard Johnson over here by being like, no, bring your whole family. They'll be going out on tour while you're filming your couple of scenes here. And that's how they get them over there. They're like, no, you're gonna have this great Mediterranean vacation, and then we're gonna, we're gonna shoot on a couple of days. No big deal. And then that's how they do it. They manage to get all these major stars over there for one or two movies. But man,
that's not just the Italians. I interviewed Eric Roberts a few years ago, and he was talking about all these weird little independent movies he does, and it's because people fly him and his wife out to go all these different places for a vacation. He just has to go and show up for work for a couple of days out of 8 or whatever.
Yeah, it's
a great gig. Yeah, but no. Go ahead.
Yeah. I was just gonna make a joke about when you get to the point where your name is that valuable that people will be like, let us pay you to take you on vacation. Take it. Why not? Go ahead, Ian.
Well, I was gonna say, Edmund Purdom plays Luigi, who's the boss that Tony starts out working for.
Yeah,
and he was in a movie I talked about a couple of weeks ago, Pieces, from 1983.
That's right. Yeah, he's one of the detectives.
Creepy Dean.
No, he's the Dean. That's what it was. Yeah.
but in this movie, he's obviously a few years younger. He plays like a sympathetic mobster. He's kind of one of those guys that's just on the brink of having, as we see, his second in command just like take over everything from him, because he's kind of like, not completely wishy-washy. He still has charisma, but he doesn't have that cutthroat kind of instinct that certainly Scarface has. But I was thinking about Pieces, watching the opening of this movie. It's so surreal, this slow motion dream sequence, which turns out to be a flashback of Jack Palance and this other guy like walking into this bedroom, coming in from a completely white light. And then there's a betrayal, there's kind of gunplay, there's a little boy who gets up and tries to attack Jack Palance after Jack Palance kills his father, and then there's a counterattack, and then we cut to present day, and it's this kind of swinging 70s tooling around Italy, winking at girls. The biggest crime I think this movie commits is there's some sequences where Tony's walking through the city. There's all these like beautiful, voluptuous Italian women walking by, and there's credits plastered all over the screen. I'm like, get out of the way.
I'm like, I just, looking at it, I can see now that you mentioned Tarantino, how this made him want to make movies, because you look at this going, if this was in America, at that time, that would have been Johnny Travolta walking down the street, looking at the ladies, doing his strut, and they pull it. What's interesting with that sequence is they pull what I call the Sixth Sense angle, to where we see the kid, the gun's empty. He tried to off, Mr. Scarface for killing his dad, whatever. And then Mr. Scarface knocks the kid out. And then we cut to seeing Tony, almost implying, if you go cinematic wise, that maybe Tony is the kid that suffered this trauma. And, and it's not until later when we find out that, no, it's this completely other second character that
it's also because that kid in the flashback had like dark hair.
Dark hair.
You kind of think the same thing. But no, the reason I thought of Pieces, not only because Evan Purdon shows up, but there's also a similar quality to that opening where it's like this really the kid kind of slow-mo hacking his mom into pieces, and the weird music and everything. Not that these things are related, but it does kind of create this weird continuity where it's like you could almost watch these as a double feature, because Pieces is also another, for lack of a better term, fun, weird slasher movie you could watch with this fun, weird gangster movie, both Italian productions, I think. Wow.
Pieces was Italian and Spanish, I think, because the director was Juan Piquer Simon, who's, I think, Spanish. So, but still very European flavored for both of them.
Yes, it is. And it's delicious.
It is.
It really is. These are amazing.
This film got me the minute Tony the Enforcer, and that's the one thing, I love, is the fact that you think with Jack Palance in it, okay, he's going to be playing like some kind of Don Corleone type of gangster. And no, these are all street level gangsters, just various levels of street level gangsters, to where, Jack Palance's Scarface Manzari, he's the upper dog of the lower organized guys. I mean, he's not exactly, because he freaks out the minute that because Tony comes up with this idea, because there's this wonderful gangster thing where there's a gambling house, and Manzari comes up and they play one hand, and he loses his money, but he asks the house if he could write a check for 3 million lira, or depending on which translation. If you watch the actual Mr. Scarface edition, with the dubbing, it's just 3 million. They don't say what denomination, but
right. And that's the thing, is like, it is lira because, well, first of all, these low-level hoods can't deal in $3 million, but also I was in Italy back in '98, and I cashed in $20 at a currency exchange, and I got 64,000 lira, and I was like, wait, what? This isn't real money. So I don't know what the conversion rate was back in 76. But 3 million is not probably as impressive. It's like $5,000. I don't know, but
that's what I was gonna say. It's probably like 10 grand, maybe at the most. So that 10, that 10 million lira that he takes is going, it's going to be life altering enough that he thinks he could go to Brazil with it. But in the grand scheme of things, it's and that plot is it's I don't know how they thought that would work, but whatever, man.
No, I liked it because if you thought a little too hard about it, you're like, wait, what? On the other hand, it plays the whole gangster trope of how he's such at a status that he writes a check for 3 million lira that he knows no one's going to be brave enough to cash. So he's basically taking 3 million lira from the poker den, stealing it, but doing it in such a way that it seems on the up and up until you see that next day when Tony and the rest of his gang are like, what the fuck are we going to do with this check? I'm not cashing it. And then Tony's like, oh, I'll cash it. And then he does it. Instead, he comes up with this whole tax evasion scenario with an actor, which is how you know Jack Palance's Scarface is a lower level thug, because he freaks the minute that this guy shows up, even though it's Tony and an actor acting like they're these representatives.
Because he's on the phone, like he's not even in the same place. It's his henchman who tips him off. He calls him on the phone. It's like, yeah, hey, the financial police are here rifling through your stuff. And he's like, oh, just slip some money in a folder and give it to him, see if the bribe will work. And there's that great negotiation between this henchman and Tony, who's in disguise because no one knows really what he looks like. He's like, so how much should we bribe him? I don't know. Why are you talking about bribes? I would just, but it's a great scenario because it reminds me of so much of this movie reminds me of like the next evolution of those Ocean's 11 George Clooney movies could have been. This could have been like an offshoot of that. It's like Ocean's 11 meets Goodfellas or something. Or no, probably more like, oh my gosh, what is the Chaz Palminteri movie with Robert De Niro? A Bronx Tale. A Bronx Tale crossed with Ocean's 11, because that was more about like low level, kind of street crime, not necessarily the mafia writ large. Such a I want to watch this movie again, like tonight. But I gotta go to bed.
It's like 10 grand. The 3 million, the 10 million lira that they took is approximately, I would say, close to 10 grand, because 865 lira equaled $1 in the US in 1976.
Okay.
So the 3 million lira that he writes a check for was about $3,500.
Yeah.
Which is, I mean, considering
also,
I mean, the gambling hall they were in, it's like, these low rent pool tables, and, it wasn't like this crazy big underground operation. It was, pretty low rent. But yeah, I love the feel of this environment and the distinction between the gangs, because you've got Luigi's gang that Tony starts out working for. They're always like hanging around in shirts. One guy had a Chicago Blackhawks like t-shirt on for some reason. But then you've got Manzari, the Scarface gang. They're all in suits, and you get the feeling they've got a reputation amongst some of the other lower class, gang members, and you see that reputation earned in the great scene where they bust into Scarface isn't with them at this point, but he sends people into the pool hall. And they just like all these guys in suits just start like mowing through the different levels of this underground scheme, not shooting people or anything like that. I mean, there are guns drawn, but they're just like swinging fists and throwing people across the room and literally like bulldozing through these gangsters. It's so impressive. It says a lot without saying anything.
Yeah, they could have easily had him show up a la, Godfather and just Tommy gun the whole place and Tommy. But no, they go and shout out to the delivery guys. They picked on the delivery guys. Those guys weren't doing shit. They were just unloading fruit. And those gangsters came up and popped them both in the back of the head with their fists. I'm like, come on, they weren't doing anything. They're just delivery guys. They aren't even probably working for Tony, for Luigi, and you're gonna hit them. And then there's some humor. It's almost not exactly satirical of the gang lifestyle, but it is kind of because you get when they're mowing through it and Manzari's guys are busting through the pool hall, they throw a guy through one window and it's literally like Top Secret gimmick. They pick him up and then throw him through the other window because that one wasn't broken.
Speaking of windows, was Tony's skin made out of adamantium? Because that bit later on where he's jumping through the window of the safe house, he's in a t-shirt and jeans, and the jeans have a patch on the ass. I don't know what that's all about. But he comes through the window, falls down into the glass that is just shattered, and then starts like swinging and taking out these other people. But he jumps up and he's like, "Oh, I don't have a scratch on me." How?
He
So
mentions
strange.
how he's got glass. He's got glass in his mouth or whatnot or something. He drops some kind of line about
Just show him show what a badass he is. That's it. Because I mean,
Yeah.
it's also he's the only one not afraid of the gangsters. Everybody else is afraid of. Like you guys said, he passed a bad check, knowing one, you probably won't cash it. Two, if it does, it bounces. And what are you going to do about it when it does?
right. Yeah.
You're like, how are we going to get our money back? So yeah, you just show him what a badass he is. By the way, $3,500 in 1976 is the equivalent of about $19,000 now.
Oh, so yeah, okay.
So we're talking like when they ripped them off for that, they walked out of there like 60 grand or so.
Yeah,
a little over 60 grand. So that's enough to like get away and start a new life.
Yeah,
I mean, it's not enough to like.
Which you'd have to.
What's that?
Which you'd have to, pulling off that kind of a stunt.
Yeah, disappearing into Brazil is the best thing you could do at that point.
Yeah.
I love that, Harry Bear is the name of the guy who plays our Tony, which is just the best name ever. But I kept thinking, like, this guy looks like the love child of a young Al Pacino and a young Thomas Jane. And I couldn't get that out of my face, out of my head the entire film. Like this, I don't know if he's a huge superstar over in Italy or whatever, but I'm like, why haven't I seen 100 movies with this guy? He's amazing.
I don't know if he was. I think I've seen him in a couple of movies, but I don't think he was like a major star.
Well,
I will say this during that shootout at the end. Oh no, this is the only film I've seen him in. So I must have seen other guys who looked like him. That shootout at the end of the movie, apparently a blank went off in his eye. So they had to stop production for a couple of weeks because like his eyeball he needed to get patched up.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Blanks can still do damage. Apparently, if you pop one off close enough to somebody's eye and it goes in their eyes, it'll fuck them up.
The cast, the characters, and everything in this environment and the energy of this film, regardless of which cut you watch, is amazing. I mean, we got our Tony guy who shows up. He's doing the Travolta strut from Staying Alive or whatever, down the road, and he's on his way to do a racket, a protection thing, which isn't much money. I mean, we're talking really low money, but he still hits up this guy for money. And this is where the film immediately had me. I'm like, okay, they're doing this kind of fun 70s opening. He kind of had this surreal thing. We got to see Jack Palance right away. Yay, he's not just here for a gimmick. Well, I mean, he is, but at least he's got more screen time than. And then he shows up, and the minute they start fighting, they have Kung Fu theater sound effects while they're fighting. And the minute that started, I'm like, okay, this is it.
they don't record sound on set in Italy. I don't know if they do today, but they did in the 70s.
He literally was, and I'm just
great.
It's beautiful.
Oh, the great perspective shots of like the close-ups of Tony like throwing a punch. I mean, it's all very like comic booky. I want to point something out, Mark. The kind of Saturday Night Fever strut that we were talking about. This movie came out a year before Saturday Night Fever.
Oh,
so I think John Travolta owes Harry Bear a great debt of gratitude.
He very well might be. He very well.
Hey, wait! Wasn't his character in Saturday Night Fever? Was it Tony Manero?
It was also Tony. Yeah,
Tony.
Oh, there you go. There you go.
There you go.
Rulers of the City is the key to all cinema. I'm putting it out there.
Brian De Palma and Oliver Stone were chilling out, going, "Hey, wait a minute."
We could just elevate this to the next level. Absolutely.
Prove me wrong.
Also in the documentary that I watched, they said Al Cleaver said that he enjoyed working for the director Fernando De Leo, who is a I have a bunch of his movies because he is one of those directors in Italy that was just, his movies are gems. Whether he's making a horror movie or a sexploitation movie or a crime movie, he made a lot of these Italian crime movies. They always have a fun, weird energy. He did make I don't know how to properly describe this movie because it's kind of a sex comedy, but then it's, depending on which cut you watch, it becomes a horror film or it doesn't. He made a sex comedy called Being 20. That is the translation of the title in English speaking places. In the United States, it cuts out these young girls go into this very small conservative town, and they're very promiscuous young girls, like showing off flesh, like sleeping around, like teasing guys and making them think they're going to sleep with them. And the whole thing plays out like a sex comedy until the last 20 minutes, where all the guys where if you watch the American version, it ends. If you watch the Italian version, everybody gets together and lynches them.
What?
Oh my god! Oh my god! Wow.
So yeah, it is kind of wild. I haven't seen either version in a little while, so I don't remember where exactly the cut happens. But I remember reading about it, reading that's what happens, and I was like, I need to find this. And the Raro video.
I need to find a pen so I can write this down. Being 20.
Yeah, Being 20. I think it's still available on Blu-ray. I think the Blu-ray has both cuts because you have to.
You have to have both cuts for that.
I think I actually read about it in an interview with Eli Roth where he was talking about like his favorite movies, and this was
To Be 20.
Oh, To Be 20, yeah.
It's To Be 20 because our guy who plays the older OG gangster in this was in that as well.
Yep.
So
oh, okay.
Oh man, looks like the Blu-ray is sadly out of print.
Vittorio Caprioli plays one of my favorite characters from the 70s now. He became one of my favorite, well, at least crime characters of the 70s. Good old Napoli is this old school gangster who is hanging around because, he's a little old to pull off jobs anymore, but they keep him around because, he's got respect and he made a name for himself in the old days. This guy is hilarious. I loved every scene that we got with Napoli, especially that scene he gets where trades back and forth with Scarface.
He's fantastic. I don't know why they decided to play him a little camp. Like, I don't understand that choice.
Well, I mean, he's got, I don't know if this is coded or what, but he's like constantly wearing this like pink neck scarf and everything. And I don't know if that was just like, he likes pink, but maybe it's just because of, growing up on American movies, that's usually coded to mean a certain thing. But there was nothing like flamboyant about him necessarily, but he's a great character. That scene where, and yes, this is a spoiler room, so I can talk about it. It was the result of the scene that I was talking about where Tony jumps through that window and like kills a bunch of people. Mm-hmm. Scarface finds out where he gets a bead on where Tony is hiding out with his other two friends, including Napoli, their safe house, sends 3 guys out there to kill them. Napoli kind of lures them into this house, and Tony and his other friend are waiting outside. All 3 of these hitmen get whacked in spectacular fashion.
Yes.
Napoli stuffs their bodies into the back of this car, drives the car to Scarface's office and parks it there, and calls him on the phone and says, yeah, look down the street. You see that car? Your men are inside. And then we find out Napoli is making this phone call from directly across the street.
Right by the car.
When his second in command goes down and like opens up the trunk of the car, Napoli is literally like 10 feet away in a phone booth, like laughing his ass off. I'm like, oh no.
Napoli's a badass. I loved that. I loved it. And I loved
he gives him like the little like up you
Yeah.
from the street. Yeah. Oh, so good.
Well, I love that whole scene because he talks about how it's the car that belonged to the three guys that are dead in the trunk, and he parked it awkwardly, which means the cops will come and take a look at it. So this guy knows his business. Napoli may seem like he's soft, but he knows his shit because he
Well,
literally.
I mean, he's the old school gangster. He's the one that they kept around because he's the guy from the old times who could tell us how everything went. Because right in the beginning of the movie, when they call him into the room and he comes in, and yeah, he doesn't look like a badass, but he's like, back in my day, this is the way we did things. But back in my day, we didn't have somebody like Scarface. So yeah,
Well, it's interesting because there is that bridge of the three generations, because Luigi respects Napoli's point of view because Napoli is older. Luigi is older than a lot of the guys working for him. There's that one younger hood with the
Beppe.
mustache.
Yeah.
Talking about who does the younger guys are all kind of annoyed by Napoli because he's just this old guy who keeps talking about the old days and he's out of touch, and he's the guy that doesn't understand TikTok. If we were to put it in a modern parlance. He knows what he's talking about. But it's not like a major thread. It's just these little background details that make this movie feel so real and vibrant. Even though he ends up becoming, in some ways, a cartoon character, he's also a complete badass. That climactic scene in the slaughterhouse, which, let me just pull over a second. I'm glad this movie is called Rulers of the City, because Mr. Scarface is a dishonest title. Jack Palance isn't in this movie that much.
No.
I mean, his character is sort of a catalyst for some of the events that happen, but you go in thinking this is going to be a movie about this gangster, and it's not. It's about the kid who's kind of trying to take him on. So when Scarface dies, there's still 20 minutes left over of like chases and awesome gunplay and amazing, as you mentioned, Joe, like motocross action.
And a shotgun that acts like a rocket launcher towards cars.
But okay, when Napoli gets into that kind of that situation where Tony is, I think it was Tony, or maybe it was the blonde guy.
It was the blonde guy, Rick. Yeah.
Okay, Rick was shooting at the last henchman alive, who's like hiding behind this cabinet. Napoli comes up at this other angle, and he's like making some reference to pool, and he's like he ricochets the bullet off of this meter and then kills the other guy. I'm like, what the hell is he talking about? Pool? Oh my god, it's a pool trick shot using a pistol. A pistol that didn't work for him for like for the previous 10 minutes. It's a great payoff.
There's that hilarious scene where he literally is in the bushes and he's like 15 feet away from one of the bad guys, and he's trying to shoot him, and the guy is turning left and right and left because the bullets are hitting on either side. And Napoli's like, what the hell's wrong with this gun?
See, I didn't understand what was going on until after that scene was just about over, because when the guy kept like moving to the left and the right, I thought he was getting shot, hit. And like, oh, but it turns out it's just like going above and around. Like I expected him to move away and there'd be like a Bugs Bunny style like series of bullets outlining his body. Oh, so good.
But yeah, I mean, the everything about this film is just so much fun. I mean, even when it gets dark, even when Beppe offs Luigi, but he doesn't admit to offing Luigi. But everybody figures Beppe lost.
He left town for an undetermined amount of time.
And now taking over the gang.
The actor gets killed when they get to the actor. He's on stage performing. He gives his bow, and at very moment, with a silencer, bang, right in the top of the head.
Well, that's what was funny. I was watching it because, folks, Scarface's buddies, once they realized that they were ripped off for $10 million, they go about looking into who did it. They find Tony and they track it down to the actor. And they wait till the actor takes a bow before they shoot him. And it's 70s, they're on low budget, so they don't show it. But they shot him in the top of his head because he just falls flat.
Yeah, he takes a bow and he just falls flat on his face. It's great.
And people are applauding. Like,
like it was part of the actor.
Like they think it's part of a shtick. Yeah, it's just, what a great bow.
Am I the only one out of this group whose heart stopped when Luigi bought it? I did not see, because it happened so quickly and it's done in such brilliant close-ups of the two actors that I don't even think you really see the gun. You see like the action of like something moving quickly, and all of a sudden Luigi's got a bullet in his head.
Yep.
Like that, I was not expecting that.
Oh yeah, it was a brutal kill. It's like suddenly you get these brutal moments, these regular like reminding you, hey, by the way, folks, this is a gangster movie.
Yeah. It's very, very Little Caesar when you think of it. You have except the movie isn't about who.
Right.
What is the guy's name? Beppo, the second in command.
Pepe, yeah, Pepe.
Pepe,
yeah. Except you don't. Yeah, I don't think they build it up as much as like when Little Caesar turns on Stanley Fields in Little Caesar, but it's there. It kind of feels like that. Like maybe they were trying to mimic that a little bit.
Yeah, and I just love that how he plays it off like, yeah, Luigi's out of town for an amount of, and Manzari knows, and everybody knows that Pepe, what the fuck are you talking about? You killed Luigi. We all know you killed Luigi.
I also like that scene in the beginning where they're like, how could you take a check from him for $3 million? Well, who the fuck's gonna stop him? The toughest gangster in town who will kill you. Are you going to say no to him? Yes, sir. I will take the check and give it to my boss, sir.
Well, let's talk about Rick for a second. Who, I mean, is another celebrity lookalike. He reminded me of Bill Fagerbeck, the guy from Wings, and he was in The Stand.
Yeah.
You know, M-O-O-N. That spells moon.
M-O-O-N, that spells moon. Yeah.
Yeah.
But we first meet him. He's in Luigi's pool hall. He feels like he got ripped off and scammed, and I think he did, and that's why Scarface comes in later to kind of see what's going on.
Right.
And the guy narrowly avoids like the illusion. I was kind of fuzzy on what exactly I was watching. I probably have to watch the movie again, but it seemed like they were able to make it look like there wasn't cheating going on, to the point where Scarface was sort of embarrassed when he left. He had the kid, roughed up and said,
Right.
you can't be a part of my gang if you're just going to be, taken for a sucker or something like that.
Yeah.
I thought that was the last we were going to see of this character. No, he turns out to be the second lead in Tony's little gang and an integral part of the movie. He's the guy who's taken over the motorbike at the end in the great slaughterhouse scene. I love it when movies fool me into thinking that this nothing character is just going to go away, and it turns out they're some of those most important people in all of the story, and that's definitely what we got here.
Well, yeah, because he's the bookend of the story. I mean, yeah, spoiler room.
But we don't know
that,
right? We're still under the assumption that kid in the opening movie, opening of the movie, to your point, Mark, is probably Tony. When we first meet Rick, there's nothing to suggest that he is going to be anybody except the guy who was meant to be an example of why you don't fuck with Scarface's gang. Right.
Exactly. It's around the middle of the movie that he tells my God, Rick is the blonde, and he tells Tony the story. And man, where was I going with this? I just lost track of.
Well, Napoli shows him the paper. He doesn't even. Rick doesn't even confess. Napoli finds the newspaper with the article. He goes, "Hey, look at this," and the guy's like, "What? You bet on something?" He's like, "No, not the horses. This article right here," and that's where they find out. And Rick's like, "Oh yeah, you guys know. Well, you don't have to stay if you don't want to, but I'm going to kill this fucker." So,
it seems like. I want did they make it clear that it was Tony's plan or because it seems to me that it was Rick's plan to rip them off.
It was Tony's plan to take the 10 million. It ended up being Rick's plan to lure Scarface
with this Coke deal thing.
Coke deal thing.
And I watched this early in the morning, so my recollection was we got the revelation of the newspaper where it's like, no, don't look at the horse, look at the story. But there was no. My understanding was there was no connection for the audience that Rick was the little boy in the beginning until Scarface walks into that room in the slaughterhouse, and there's that kind of reveal, which I think was great because you see there's something about Jack Palance when he walks into that room. It's almost like Superman seeing kryptonite in that lead case in Lex Luthor's lair. He's like, oh, I feel sick. Like, I know what this is all about, and I'm kind of in trouble here.
We might have a difference here because which version did you watch?
That's the thing. I know you guys were tossing around like the different versions and stuff right before we got on.
Yeah, I have a 96.
Did you watch the version that I sent you? Posted the link on, or
that's the thing is I know that you sent the link to it, but I ended up just like looking at YouTube because I was half out of my mind. I think I forgot that you had sent the link.
They might have cut it differently on the US version because in my version, he flat out tells them about 40 minutes into the movie that Jack Palance killed his father.
How long is your version?
Cut it in as like a flashback at the very end to connect it.
How long is your version, Joe?
Mine is listed at 96 minutes.
There you go. There's the additional footage that the 93-minute version that I watched last night.
Maybe that's cut from your.
Did not have that.
I watched mine was 93 minutes as well. Yeah.
And then the 89-minute version, which I watched earlier today, just before the show to compare, which I got a bunch of notes of differences. It's missing a chunk of that as well. What's interesting of watching Mr. Scarface, which is the American cut, the 89-minute version, and the 93-minute version, which is the one version that's on YouTube, The Rulers of the City, is that the Mr. Scarface one, everybody's dubbed except Jack Palance.
Yeah.
And in the other version, Rulers of the City, everybody's not dubbed except Jack Palance.
Was your version in Italian?
Huh? Yeah.
The Rulers of the City version that you watched was in Italian? Yeah. Well, it's all Italian actors except for Jack Palance. And yeah,
it was just hilarious to watch the two and get the difference to where all of a sudden Jack is, I'm like, oh, that's Jack's normal voice. Oh, everybody else, they dubbed them. But that's the difference between the 93 and the 96-minute version then, is because that has dialogue and that's cut from the 93-minute version, which I saw, and obviously cut from the 89 version. Now, comparing the two, a lot of the cuts for the American version, go figure, are just the more salacious things or things for time. So just the things that I remembered from watching it last night, my brain kind of remembered everything. The opening in the Italian in Rulers of the City is longer. They cut the pool hall scene where we had Tony walking through the pool hall, talking to everybody and say, hey, how you doing? How you doing? They cut that. They cut right to him in Luigi's office. Oh. So they cut him going through the pool hall scene, looking at everybody else. They cut the hooker in the guy scene, the guy with the hairnet that tries to set up Tony with the local thugs. They cut it to where he's already standing when Tony comes to the door, rather than sitting on the bed with the lady in the bedroom. The fight with Beppe is cut shorter, where Tony and Beppe, go mano a mano, and Luigi's like, you fucking kids. They cut out the whole singing bit with Luigi's girlfriend. That awkward song talking about abortion and unpaid taxes.
Yeah, I honestly could have done without that too. It wasn't until I realized she was standing on a pedestal that I'm like, why is Big Bird standing in the middle of this club, like singing?
She was singing, and I'm listening to the words because she was singing in English, and I'm listening to the words like, oh, okay, it's a nightclub song, and then all of a sudden she's singing about how she still loves the person, even with the abortion and the unpaid tax. I'm like, wait, what? Did she? I rewound it. I'm like, oh shit, no, she says that. She says abortion and unpaid tax.
Italian crime movies are wild for this very reason. Like, stuff like that is just put in.
I want to see the Taylor Swift cover of that song.
And they also cut out the whole section to where we were talking about it just earlier. Beppe talking about how Luigi, he's talking to the gang after he talks to Manzari, because Beppe is doing this deal with Manzari, and Manzari's like, yeah, okay, you can take over Luigi's stuff. I get cut. He's like, okay. Then Beppe has a group meeting with the whole gang going, yeah, Luigi's gone. I'm handling things for now. Manzari's looking to look past things if he takes over things, and everybody's just like, yeah, this is a bad deal. Who you fooling? Anyway, that whole thing to where, Napoli kind of sneaks into the meeting and then he sneaks out to call the guys on the phone. They cut from that. They cut from Beppe meeting with Manzari to Napoli on the phone talking about how he can't go back to the club anymore. Yeah, they cut that whole section out. And that boggled my mind. I'm like,
especially because that's the scene where Pepe essentially says to Napoli, like, you can't hang around here anymore. We're your business is no good here anymore. Wow. I mean, that's definitely a choice, but
yeah.
Oh my gosh.
So it was interesting to see what they cut. Also, the go-go dancer, our topless go-go dancer dance, they cut that short to where in the one we had Tony and Rick getting into a booth with the cigarette. They cut that section out to where they just show up and then they see the dancer and then they kind of head to the booth and then they cut away. So a lot of scenes they either trimmed or cut out completely. It was really well. Oh, Napoli isn't hung as much because in the Rulers of the City, when the three thugs show up to his house looking for Tony, they make a noose and they're actually hanging Napoli when our guy does the old Wolverine through the window. And in the Rulers of the City, in the Mr. Scarface version, they cut that scene to where it barely... he's not hanging there that long. Whereas in the Italian version, they do that for a bit to where he's actually struggling to where you think Napoli might die.
See, I'm glad you clarified, Mark, because when you said Napoli wasn't hung as much, I thought you meant they actually shrunk his dick.
Well, no. They didn't have the technology back then to do that.
Okay.
This is an ILM. So. Though the dubbing is hilarious.
ILM stands for inches lost by the minute.
Yeah, there you go. The dubbing is hilarious too, because comparing the two, like I said, watching them, especially if you watch them back to back, but I watched them next day, but still remembered the dialogue, what was translated in the subtitles versus what the dubbing said is much like, and we've talked about it before, Ian, the dubbing on the Return to the 36th Chamber, which is the only version we pretty much have, the bad English dubbing with and now the full 90%. That type of bad dubbing. They have that here to where when the guy was fighting when Tony was fighting the thug in the stable to get the money, very little lira if you think about the money conversion, but they're dancing around and he gets this whip out and he swings this whip and he gets him and he spins around and he's like, oh, who knew you could, spin around at your age is the Italian version. That's how it translated in the subtitles. I liked the dubbed version because you might be the Marquis de Sade, but I don't swing like that.
Yeah. It's so good.
It's so good. This whole movie.
It really deserves more. I feel like more people should see it, but I don't know. I feel like when people talk about Italian movies of the 70s, they talk more, or B movies at least. Yeah. They talk more about horror movies. They talk more about giallos and cannibal movies, and like Dario Argento stuff like Suspiria. But nobody really talks about. And you have a lot of those same directors. Sergio Martino, Umberto Lenzi. All those guys that made all those Italian horror movies, they're all the same guys making these. They're just going from job to job. And it amazes because Lucio Fulci made a couple of these. Nobody ever talks about Contraband, but everybody talks about, obviously Zombie and all that stuff. Nobody talks about, Violent Naples from Umberto Lenzi, but everybody talks about Cannibal Ferox, and these movies they're really good for the most part. Ruggero Deodato made Live Like a Cop, Die Like a Man, which is one of these movies. Great title, by the way. And it's another movie like this where it just has this awesome energy. And it's just like two rogue cops who are like, you know what? I'm tired of the mafia doing all this shit. We're going to just kill them all. And it's just they're just goofy fun. And nobody knows these movies. And it's such a shame because these movies deserve to actually be seen because they're so much fun.
Well, I mean I've been doing a series for the last couple of years called Academia Giallo, where we look at Giallo films like every month, and a lot of the directors that you've named off we've covered on the show. But my colleagues, I'm sure, because they're the ones who are kind of walking me through this education, because it's a big blind spot for me. They probably know about all these things, but I have not really delved into this corner of things. This might be the first. Rulers of the City might be the first of its kind that I've seen, knowing now that there's these great jolly directors out there making this kind of stuff. I feel like I don't have time for it, but maybe in 2025 I'm gonna do some pair ups, because that sounds like if there's more of this treasure trove out there, I need to know about it.
Some of them kind of cross over into Giallo territory, like oh my god, what's it called? Shadows in the Dark, I think is the title of it. That kind of crosses into being kind of a Giallo, but the subgenre is called poliziotteschi, which means it's just cop movies basically. And they'll often be like actors like Franco Nero, Maurizio Merli, who are just playing like these tough rogue cops who are just like, I am tired of the crime in Rome, and I'm just gonna go kill everybody on the street. That's Death Wish 3 before Death Wish 3 existed.
Nice.
Yeah, and you're right about the energy. I'm like, by the end of it, I'm looking at this going, this has got to be one of the first like upbeat gangster films that I've ever watched in my life, because our three principal guys, yes, spoiler room, folks, our three principal guys live at the end. Not only do they live, but they're smiling and they're hopping in their car, and you get some happy, fun music going on after they've just annihilated this mid-tier gang. And I'm like, I'm here for it.
Yeah, these movies are great. I love them. I'm glad you guys are discovering them now.
Well, the other thing to consider about that happy ending, Mark, is like they kind of discover, well, they've wiped out Scarface's gang. They're certainly not the only game in town, but they very well could have set up their own shop to become a new criminal underworld organization. They've certainly proven their bona fides, but no, they just want to go hang out in Brazil. There's not this. A lesser movie would have been like, now we've risen to the top and power has corrupted all of us. But no, they're just going to go, three dudes going down to Brazil to hang out on the beach, and it's all fine.
And it's all fine. And not only that, there's this wonderful little gimmick they do, because Tony's like, we're going to go to Brazil with the money because he's got a cousin down there who's made a ton of money. He's rich down there. We could go down there with our rich money and we'll just live like kings. And then at some point during the course of the film, he mentions this at the end. Oh yeah, my rich cousin. Yeah, he lost all of his money like at the track or something recently, and now he's cleaning toilets. And Napoli's like, oh, that's okay. With our money, we can go down and help him. Yeah, let's go to Brazil. And they all get in their car and they head out to Brazil. They're like, we just took out the underground underbelly gang of this neighborhood, and now we're going to Brazil.
I would watch an entire series of these three guys going country to country, just like having these criminal underworld misadventures. Oh,
well, there's such a great play between them, because Rick, like you said, when we're introduced to him in that, he's a little more serious. He doesn't play it like melancholy serious, but he's a little bit more straight. Tony is like, yeah, I'm the ladies' man. I can get whatever I want. And Napoli, we're not sure, who he is outside of being an OG gangster that seems to just be enjoying the sweet life and just trying to, retire alive. So there's a great dynamic between these three, and they're wonderful. Even during this gunfight with Manzari's, with Scarface's gang at the end, which I've got to mention, wonderful death. There's two great fun kills in here. I know that sounds sick, but still, there's one to where Tony's running with a shotgun and this other guy's running through the warehouse, and he busts through the door just as Tony's there, and Tony's just like, oh, bam, and just kills the guy. And the other one is the guy who he's hiding out in this like slaughterhouse where there's hanging hooks. And he gets up to take a shot, and he gets shot, and we cut away. and we see him fall, and we cut away, and then we come back. Napoli runs across him later, hanging from the meat.
These movies are wild, man. The kills in these things are great.
It's just real quick. This reminded me also of RoboCop. That was the kind of was the power plant or whatever on the outskirts of Detroit, where it's kind of bookended. And when I saw the slaughterhouse set piece, I'm like, oh, this is RoboCop. 11 years earlier or whatever.
Yeah, 11 years before RoboCop was made. Yeah.
But sorry, Joe, I cut you off.
Well, I was gonna say, just the kills in these things are always just a lot of fun. Like there's one where like John Saxon in one of these movies is a crime boss. Somebody pisses him off, so he ties him to the end of a fucking gutter in a bowling alley, and they just start bowling at him. The movies are wild. There's one where he strings a guy, John Saxon again, has a guy strung up upside down, and he's just like wailing golf balls into him. These movies are insane. If you haven't seen enough of these movies, you need to see them. And Mr. Scarface is easy to find because it's on like every public domain box set ever made. Apparently, I checked my movies today, and I have apparently 6 copies of it on various box sets. But the Raro Video one on the Fernando de Leo box set's the best one.
And you can find at least the 93-minute and the 89-minute version on YouTube.
Yeah,
there's a number of
great transfers too. I mean, these look really sharp. Although I got to say, Joe, because I think on Amazon or whatever, I saw that box art that you just held up, and it's got Jack Palance shooting machine gun or Tommy gun. That never happens in this.
No, that never happens either. No.
No, the only time
not in any version.
The only time we ever see Mr. Scarface hold anything other than a cigarette holder in his fingers is in the opening when he shoots the dad. Other than that, he never has a gun or does anything.
Speaking of cigarette holders, that thing does not fall out of his mouth. He gets shot like 8 times at the end, and he even dies in the close-up with it clenched in his teeth. Oh, so good.
It kind of reminded me of that one scene that went viral from like an old Bollywood movie where the guy keeps getting shot and he keeps screaming again and like falling up against the wall, then he gets shot again. It kind of reminded me of that a little bit.
Well, I got to say, Jack Palance has one of the all-time great movie faces, and one of the rare faces that Mort Drucker, the Mad Magazine caricature artist, I remember his drawings of Jack Palance in the 1989 Batman parody. Jack Palance's face looks exactly like the cartoon version of his own face. It's beautiful.
It's so a very distinct face. Yeah,
he has a wonderfully
distinct
face.
Oh, I wonder, Mark, since you knew Robert Zadar, you interviewed him. I wonder if he ever told you his Jack Palance story.
He told me his Kurt Russell story and a couple others, but I don't think he told me his Jack Palance story.
So apparently, when they were shooting Tango and Cash, when they were on their meal break, they were in like a diner or something that was closed down, and the whole place had like mirrored walls. And Palance, he's apparently even back then was kind of an intimidating guy. So he's sitting in a corner, up against the wall. Like he's not everything is behind him. He's looking towards the wall and he's sitting there eating. And I guess they were ribbing this poor PA who was like, "Oh my God, that's Jack Palance. I love Jack Palance. I'd love to go talk to him." And Robert Zadar and Stallone and everyone were like, "Yeah, go talk to him. Go tell him to be." So he goes over while Palance is eating, and I guess he didn't like to be disturbed. The kid comes up behind him, and he's like, excuse me, Mr. Palance. And from what Zadar told me, Palance doesn't turn around and look at the kid. He looks at the kid through the mirror. He just kind of looks up as he's eating, and the kid's like already getting intimidated. And he's like, "Mr. Palance, I am your biggest fan. I've seen every single one of your movies." And he goes, "Yeah, name them." And the kid just like stands dead. He's like, "Excuse me?" And Palance gets up, and he was a tall dude. This is when he finally gets up. He turns around, he looks at the kid and goes, "You said you've seen all my movies. Name them." And Zadar said that kid must have shit himself.
I imagine. Wow.
I know I would. Yeah, I mean,
I would start with Mr. Scarface.
That's fantastic. Oh man.
And
But
now
yeah,
that I think of it, Batman, the '89 Batman, kind of did the whole Little Caesar
yeah,
criminal who's coming up, and Jack Palance is on that end of it. There, he's
yeah,
Carl Brisham. So yeah,
yeah.
it all seems to come around. It all seems to come back around.
All seems to come back around. Oh man, I am so glad I discovered this film because I was like, oh crap, I got 5 weeks to fill in January. Maybe I should take a break. And then I ran across this, and I am so glad I did.
It is a gem. It is a hidden gem that like nobody knows about.
The thing is, for the type of movie it is, people do not avoid this because it's got a solid story. It's got fun characters. It's got a beginning, middle, and the end. And for the most part, depending on which cut you watch, it's very coherent. Like one difference I noticed as well between and I think it's the difference between because of the dubbing versus subtitles, is that when Rick is finally just gets his revenge, and this scene isn't drawn out in the US, like North America, they draw it out to where they'd be exchanging and the sweat would be pouring, and he'd be twitching. Nah, Scarface shows up, he gets the right position, Rick just pulls that guns out, takes out his guard. What's funny is and I don't think it was in the subtitles, they don't give him a line at all. When Rick is facing Scarface with the gun in the Mr. Scarface version, he actually says, wait, I'm all for doing the drug deal. Can we still do the drug deal? He says that before he gets shot in the in the Mr. Scarface version. And there's no subtitle. I remember, I might be misremembering, but I don't think there's any subtitle of him pleading to asking, because he's still confused who this person is. Are we going to still do the drug deal? And in the Italian version, he doesn't say anything at all. Rick just shoots him, and I don't think they subtitle him at all.
It's it's a brutal scene because everything is brought back around for the audience, but it's unclear if how aware Mr. Scarface is of this, because he certainly, as we've established, doesn't look anything like he did at the end. Mm-hmm. He might have figured out because he would have recognized the building and the room, but it's not completely spoon-fed to us. Not that it needs to be, because we already know, but it's not underscored with like Sharpie marker in the screenplay, which I appreciated. And I also appreciate, as we mentioned, that that's not the end of the movie. You kind of think it is, but no, they still have to get out of this situation where there's like 20 guys running around versus 3. It's brilliant. This is going to be a puzzlement to me. I don't know why, outside of Tarantino, who he's especially in the past, he's had a habit of name dropping obscure films in interviews, like, oh yeah, Rulers of the City, but he's got such a rat-a-tat thing that there's no follow-up, like, oh, tell me what that's about, or like, why is that movie important to you, what is it? I feel like this movie I mean, people should know about this movie, and so many more.
But yeah, that's why as soon as I saw it, I was like, I'm jumping at the opportunity to come talk about this movie, because nobody ever talks about it, and it's severely underrated.
It is. I agree. And I think that good way to sum it up for this evening is that, yeah, it is underrated. It has depending on which cut you have, it has a few more exploitation moments than some others. The go-go scene is a little longer. The scene Lear's a little longer with our 2 heroes and 3 ladies in the bed.
It's an Italian movie. Of course it's going to do that.
But I think all of us would recommend this film. This film is so much fun.
We've all been gushing about it for an hour.
Yeah, we've been gushing about it for an hour, but it's also, from the 70s. For the 70s, this film is a breezy watch too. This film just moves, regardless of which cut you watch. It moves. I'm like, wow.
I'm gonna throw it on the gauntlet. This is the first movie I've seen of 2024. I watched it 4 hours into the new year. I'm gonna say, everybody out there who loves movies, I forbid you from watching any new 2024 release until you've watched Rulers of the City, aka Mr. Scarface, because this is the bar. Like, you got to measure everything you're going to watch this year against this film. If it's not at least as good or imaginative, it's not worth your time.
If you don't think you can make a fun, gangster movie that isn't like a completely satirical type of top secret type of movie, you're wrong. Watch this movie. And I think that we'll wrap it up here. So I hope you folks have enjoyed this discussion. We still didn't touch everything on this film, so you should still seek it out and watch it, experience it for yourself, because it is a blast. And yeah, so now this is where I give my wonderful panel license to shill. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, our folks who have tuned in tonight to our live session. We've had at least 4 folks. I appreciate you quite a bit. And Joe, go ahead first. License to shill is yours.
I'm on the Literary License podcast. We just posted our episode covering 2 Christmas movies, Tales from the Crypt from 1972, and A Christmas Horror Story, which both are very, very good. I grew up on the 72 Tales from the Crypt, so I love that one.
Christmas Horror Story is a fun movie.
Christmas Horror Story is very good too, and I was surprised at how much I liked that one. I didn't think I was going to like it as much as I did. And Tales from the Crypt, I'm just gushing about with the co-host for quite a bit, and we talk about everything that went into that. Peter Cushing losing his wife right before he made this movie, and then having this storyline with the guy who's mourning his dead wife, who's now being bullied, and of course all the other stories too. But that's the one that always stood out to me. I'm what am I, a transcriber on The Last Drive-In, which is why I put that there. So I love working that. That's my favorite job, favorite job I've ever had. Is there anything else I'm doing? I'm going to try to be back for Scarface next week if I'm not working Monday night. So I will.
Okay.
I will try to be here for that. I as soon as Mark said pre-code, I was like, man, I love pre-code movies. I have all these Warner box sets of like the Forbidden Hollywood box sets, and I have the Universal one too. And I'm like, let's just go through these. This gives me an excuse to watch them. Awesome. Otherwise, they might just sit there collecting dust forever, and I don't want that either.
No.
So yeah, that's about it. If you check this out and you do like it, I suggest grabbing the Fernando de Leo box set that Rulers of the City is on, because that's got a bunch of his movies, and they are all fantastic. If you want to look into them, Almost Human is another great one of these with Thomas Milian. What else? Let me look at my shelf. I got all my Italian directors together, so Policio Tescis are mixed in with horror and whatever else. Mob Boss with Telly Savalas is fun. So yeah, there's a lot of these things, man. Just go check them out. John Saxon's in a bunch of them, playing crime lords of different varying degrees, and they're all a bunch of fun. From Corleone to Brooklyn, Rome Armed to the Teeth, all that stuff. So go check those out, and yeah, that'll be it. I'm shilling stuff that isn't my own because I'm just shilling stuff that I love.
Does Saxon have his shirt off in any of those?
Most likely in all of them.
Okay.
Yeah, it's 70s Saxon. I'm going to take the shirt off at some point.
It's 70s Saxon. So
he wasn't even ripped. It was just a dad bod, but that's what was in back then. His hairy chest sticking out of a polo shirt. Yeah, all that stuff. He's that kind of gangster. Horn mustache.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. The whole 9 yards. Complete package. And Ian, as always, license to shill is yours now, sir.
Well, I'm Ian Simmons. I run Kicking the Seat, which you can find at kickseat.com and also on YouTube if you look up Kicking the Seat. Joe, it's funny. I also do another monthly series called Beyond Hammerland, and we covered Tales from the Crypt a few months ago. That was the first time I'd ever seen that movie, and that was another one where I'm like, where has this been all my life? Growing up on the HBO series, I thought that's what Tales from the Crypt was, but again,
it's
perfect
beautiful. That Peter Cushing sequence, that story breaks your heart.
It does.
When we were talking about it last week, it seemed everybody was talking about. There's 3 segments that are 5 out of 5, and then there's a couple that are just okay. But those 3 are so good, and all through the house, Blind Alleys, and Poetic Justice. Fucking phenomenal. But yeah, watch Tales from the Crypt too. It's a great movie.
Yes.
I'm sure it's streaming somewhere.
Probably, but it's also one that, much like this movie, which I'm going to look up that box set, that's something you should own and revisit. But yeah, that's all my stuff, I think.
Mhm.
Yeah, lots of things to look forward to in 2024. Hopefully, some of them involving sleep, because I'm short on that. Happy New Year.
Hopefully. And yes, well, specialmarkproductions.com for all your movie man needs. You get links to the TikTok, the YouTubes, the all the stuff, Instagrams. You got my interviews and that. Yeah, the clock has reset to zero. The counters have reset to zero again. We had a wonderful 2023. I made a video or two during that time. Plenty more to come, hopefully. And man, I think we're in for a wild ride this year, looking at a lot of these movies. And Scarface this month's gonna be crazy. And then Joe alluded to, yes, next week will be our first rated PC for pre-code special, where we're looking at the 1932 version of Scarface. And then, if that's not enough, after that, we will be looking at the 1983 version of Scarface to compare the two. And then we have Captain Scarface, and we'll be rounding it off with Lady Scarface, because it's Scarred Faces month, folks. So you're going to want to keep it here, because we got a whole lot of crime films to talk about. And thank you for taking this journey with me, gentlemen. And now, until next time, folks, stay safe, have fun, and we'll just say a good night, everyone.
Good night.